Now Habersham is proud to sponsor interviews with the candidates for the May 24th political primaries. We hope by viewing these personal interviews, you'll get to know the candidates who will be making decisions that impact your life, your family, and your livelihood here at the local and state level in Georgia. We hope you'll vote May 24th, and we hope you'll be more informed in that process by hearing from the candidates themselves in these one-on-one interviews sponsored by Now Habersham. Hi, this is Now Habersham, and today we're visiting with Tanya Elrod, a candidate for the sheriff of Habersham County. Welcome, Tanya, to Now Habersham.
Thank you very much.
Let's start off talking about what your formal education you had during your lifetime has been in order to prepare you to be in a leadership role like sheriff.
Well, of course, I graduated from Central in '91, and I moved on from there and went to Gainesville College. Got my associate's degree there, and from there I went to North Georgia College, which the name I know has changed since then, in Dahlonega. Finished up my degree in physical education. Unfortunately, after that, broke my poor mother's heart, went straight to the sheriff's office. Total opposite of what she had wanted to do and what I thought of doing. My life has always been kind of pulling me toward law enforcement, so I went to work for the sheriff's office. I worked in the jail for almost a year and got sent to police academy, graduated with honors from that, and that's where it all started.
All right. Well, let's talk with me, if you will, of either hobbies, interests, volunteers, other experiences you've had, even back to your younger youthful days, that maybe might make you a good leader. What are some things that have happened to you, you've discovered, or you've experienced that would make you a leader here of law enforcement in Habersham County?
Well, younger, I enjoyed basketball, so that was my big thing. I loved it. So I played ball most of my life. And then when I graduated from college, I did do some help at the schools and did some student teaching. During that time, I coached basketball. Tried to stay involved in that. Loved to get out. I tried to help boys and the girls teams, whichever I could. I helped Terry Skinner. Now, she was a coach then. I helped her for a couple of years. It was great. Got to get really involved, do things. Did some mentoring also. My mom worked in the school system, so when I moved on after that into the sheriff's office, I did a lot of mentoring, got to meet a lot of kids, get active in things, any kind of groups around that had something involved with the kids or somebody reaching out, helping, just volunteer work. I always jumped right in to try to help with that.
All right. So let's say you get elected. What is something you're going to focus on? What needs attention? What would be your first item of business to try to improve in Habersham County? And you've been in the sheriff's department, so you know some things. So share that with us. My
big thing is building the bridges. I want to build bridges back with the community, with the children, get us more involved. I mean, the kids are everything to us. We help teach them from an early age on up. I think it make a huge impact. They see how much that we care on that side, and because a lot of police are perceived to be bad or bullies, with all the horrible things going on in the world, they kind of tend to focus on the bad side of police and the things that have to happen. But I think that if we get back and show them how they can approach us, come to us, just work together. I know a lot of times I go around to the schools and get to show them my car, and a lot of them are kind of sketchy about it, but you get them to get in there and look at the lights and, blow the sirens and stuff, tell them about a little bit of what you do, and, it makes a big difference. Because I could see them from that point, like if I went to Walmart, Kmart, or just to the park, they'd say, "You're that lady cop." And I said, "I am." It opened up a huge possibilities and things, Kids nowadays, I actually talked to a guy the other day. I mentored his sister back when they were first and second grade, and now he's in the military overseas, and he'll hit me up on Facebook and say, "Hey, how's your mom, and how are you, and thanks for everything that you did back then," and it warms your heart just to know you made that, maybe just a small little bit of impact, but it's great.
Sure. I teach a variety of communication and journalism courses at Georgia State University, travel back and forth a couple of days a week. But let me touch on something, and I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, but I think it's an important issue for you, because it's, to me, an important issue for all the women in my class particularly. It's also an issue for the men, but it's particularly for the women. 25 years ago when I moved to Habersham County, a woman was paid in America 73 cents for a dollar that a man was paid for the exact same jobs. And this isn't just fabrication. This was from the Department of Labor,
Yes.
who studied it and still studies it every single year. Since I've been in Habersham, which is 27 years, we're now at 79 cents.
Yeah.
We've gone up 6 cents
Wow.
in over one generation, a generation being 20 years. That's moving slow.
Very slow.
You've selected to run for an office that typically in the state of Georgia, a man would have.
Yes.
And we have a woman running for president as well right now. So tell me, and I don't know that we've ever had a female governor in Georgia. I don't think we have.
I think so.
So tell me how you are going to overcome this and why you think it's important.
Well, I think it's important because, it's a new day. And I don't particularly look at it as a male-female thing. I think it's where you dig down deep in your heart and see where your passion and what you're loyal to and what you see. And that's what I've done. I've dug down deep. I've brought out everything that I love, and it's law enforcement. And I think it is typically, yes, a male thing. However, I think that now that the way times have changed, they're ready for the woman. But it's all in how you handle yourself and how you go out and do situations. And I think the 18 years that I have actually worked on the road, the calls I've handled, the people I've met, they see that, yeah, she might be a girl, and, to my mom and dad, I'm still that little girl. But I can handle myself, and I can get out and take care of situations. And I think that a lot of them I do it with maybe a little more compassion than a male could, because
You're a nurturer.
I try to be, yes.
So I want to ask you something now. In that 18 years, can you think back about one or two experiences that had to be tough? You had to be tough. And tell us about those, where you had to be strong and make some really difficult decisions.
Yeah, there have actually been quite a few. I mean, you get faced with situations that you want to believe that nothing happens in Habersham and it's quiet. And for the most part, it has been. But you do have a few times where you run into situations with guns or such things. And there's been a few times that I've had a gun pointed at me. More recent than I want to remember. Thanks to the good Lord, he jammed that gun, or I wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
But you just got to kind of step back and, take a look and build from that. And there's other situations before where, maybe I'd go up against a guy your size or a little bit bigger, and he'd kind of look at me like, well, you're not going to take me in. And, fortunately, I haven't had to really fight anyone much. I've had a few people I've had to tussle with before, but for the most part, you have that stern voice. You tell them what you're there for. Show them that you mean business, and things usually turn out a whole lot better. Had a guy twice your size one time say, you're not going to take me in. I said, oh, yes, I am. He said, well, I guess you will. Turned around, put his hands behind his back, and there we went. He said, it's all on how you treat. You treated me good, and I'm not going to do that. He said, plus I know you have guns, and you'd probably have to hurt me. And I said, well, we're just glad it never got to that point, so.
The video of the incident that you just described of the gentleman's gun jamming, that you could have been shot.
Yes.
And I think shots maybe were fired in the incident. I'm trying to remember.
Yes.
Made regional media just this past week. So let's just talk about that incident. I know you didn't want to talk about the details of it, like in a report, but how about human behavior? What are one or two things you gained from that really will make you a great sheriff?
Well, the one thing that really, I guess, always stays on my mind is the fact that before I got to that call, the two guys that were there before were there with him for 18 minutes before I pulled up. So within that 18 minutes, anything could have happened. But to go back and watch the video, they were having a conversation just like we are. Everything was calm. And everything can be calm and stay calm, but in a split second, somebody can just flip and it can go from life to death.
So you have to be prepared to act quickly.
Very quickly. Very quickly. And then you've got to know, and in your mind, you've got to make that split decision between a life and a death.
So let me ask you, there are lots of places all over this country where the decision was made for the law officer to pull the trigger and ended that person's life. You chose not to do that.
Yes, sir.
That was a tough decision for you to make.
It was very hard.
Wow.
Very.
law officers of every level, police, sheriff's deputies, highway patrol, the FBI, the GBI, all of you risk your lives just in the instant you were relating to us. We think of you as very courageous. You're underpaid, and sometimes a large section of the population throughout the country even look down on some law enforcement and are always trying to find a reason why they're the problem, particularly if you get pulled over for a ticket, something was wrong with your radar. But the fact of the matter is you're very courageous and you risk your life, and we thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
But sometimes bad decisions can be made. Maybe not intentionally, but sometimes they are. In Atlanta, down the street from where I work, we had 3 no-knock warrant officers go into a woman's house who was in bed, 92-year-old Katherine Johnson.
Yes. And
and while she was under the blankets, shot her numerous times and then planted a gun at the scene. So let me ask you, how would you deal with members of your staff if someone chose, even under oath, to say something you knew for a fact was not true? How would you react as their leader?
Well, that's one thing I'm not going to tolerate. If you can't trust your law enforcement officers, who can you trust? And I'm not going to have anyone on my staff that I cannot trust. That's why I think with a proper training and sitting down and treating your officers like somebody, like we can sit here and talk, I want them to feel like they can come to me. And if they get in a situation that they say, okay, I did wrong, admit that to me. We're going to work on that. We're going to make you a better officer from that. Because that, to me, when you can admit that you're wrong, that's gonna turn around and make one of the best officers you can have.
Like any of us in any of our jobs.
Exactly.
If we admit the error and then move forward. Speaking of no-knock warrants, at the recent Habersham Political Forum, sponsored by the Habersham Chamber of Commerce and the Farm Bureau, you answered this question, and I'd just like to ask you again, because viewers will come who maybe were not at that meeting, although there were a lot of people there.
Yes.
How do you feel about no-knock warrants here in Habersham County?
Well, I have to say no on them. And the simple reason is because the way that the world is today, you do not know who has a gun on the other side of that door. You don't know 100%. You do not know who's on the other side of that door. So if it's something from either a drug bust or anything like that, it's like they were talking last night. When you work on a doper's time, there's a lot of waiting. You can wait. There's nothing wrong with waiting. You wait it out because that way you know you're going to go home, your officer's going to go home, and the people behind that door is going to go home. They have people that love them regardless of the situation or what they've done. That's somebody's baby on the other side of that door.
Yeah. And it is, I believe it's a policy or guideline law, and you can correct me because I'm a journalist. I'm not a person who deals with laws, but I think you're supposed to ascertain whether there's a child or a baby in a house before you can even do no. And so if you don't do that, then we see what can happen.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You 100%. Could you tell somebody who's in that house? No. I mean, you don't know unless you can set up on something that long. But to me, it's still not worth it. It's not worth risking your life or anyone else's just to go kick a door in. It's something you can wait it out.
So let me ask you a question, Tanya. If you're elected, if you win the primary and then you're elected,
Yes.
How will Habersham County be different with Tanya Elrod as sheriff?
Well, it will be different because I want the community to know, and I'm going to get them involved to see that they can come approach me at any point in time. They can welcome to the sheriff's office. I want to get them involved and see what we are and what we're about. I want to get their input. I want to get them. There's a lot of things that need to be done. Like I said, there's a lot of guns in the world today. There's a lot of people that have guns because they'll go out and get them because they're scared of what's going to happen. We need to train them. We need to offer more things to the public. We have a lot of people that say, hey, can I go out with you to the range or something? Just get them some classes. I mean, that's what we're about. We're community servers. We're here to help make the community the best it can be. And anything that we need to do to get it, to make Habersham County the greatest, because people look and they'll see how great we are, that makes them want to move in. That makes our county grow. It makes us all better.
We've been speaking with Tanya Elrod, candidate for sheriff of Habersham County. Tanya, good luck.
Thank you, sir. I
All right.
appreciate it.
I'm Dick Stafford for Now Habersham, and now we're speaking with Chad Mealer, candidate for sheriff in the Republican primary. Welcome to our program, Chad.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to ask you a few questions about your plans to run for sheriff here in Habersham County. What formal training or education have you had that prepares you for the role of sheriff in our county?
Well, as I've spoke throughout this race, I've been with the Hall County Sheriff's Department for about 25 years. Throughout those years, it has wound up through my knowledge, training, and experience of role of patrol, burglary suppression, high-risk warrants, warrant division. I've worked at jail. I've worked all areas within law enforcement. So it's basically on-the-job training or on-the-job experience is what has brought me to that question, yes.
What do you think are some of the challenges that face Habersham County and the area of law enforcement, particularly from the point of view as a sheriff's office or being sheriff? What are some challenges you think you might work on if you were elected sheriff?
Technology, human growth. I see that some challenges in the future that's coming up because we got to stay on top of technology. You got identity thefts, you got phone scams, you got to educate these people, the elderly people that get phone scams out here is something big, and a lot of that ties in with technology, with the computer stuff that's going on. There's several different things that on a forum that I stand on. One's community involvement, but as far as another challenge is staffing. Having officers come and go. You're training, you're putting money into them, and then they wind up leaving. I've heard the problem's money. I get out here with the community involvement and ask people these questions, and one of the things that I see as far as staffing, it's not so much the money. If you look around, other than the counties that's below us, we pay equal, might even pay a little bit less than some of these. And when you look at, there's two things come to mind in that is leadership and communication. I've looked at some other agencies with their leadership and the open line of communication through the ranks. The guys stay. They stay for a good while. So, I don't know if it's so much the money. Yeah, money's good, but if you open lines, that's one small fraction of what I see.
What kind of ongoing certification do you think either required or just training that might not be required for sheriff's deputies in Habersham County?
Well, the third thing, and that's a very good question, the third thing that I see as far as training undergoing is if you've got an officer that comes on and he's working on the road, he's working patrol, and he's a good officer, and say maybe you've got 3 or 4 of those that way, and one wants to go to investigations, one wants to go to the courthouse, they want to move around within it, one wants to work drugs. If you leave them in a position of where they are right then, for a long period of time, they get stale, they decide they want to move on somewhere else to get this education. So I feel like if you put people in a position such as investigations or somebody that works drugs and you send them to those classes, you're not only benefiting the department because you're paying for classes, you've got a guy that's what he wants to do, and he's going to be there. He's going to want to stay because that's what he wants to do. And instead of sending him to different classes, you're supposed to have 20 hours a year required by post. But if you send him to, patrol classes and he's wanting to work his way towards some other area, then you're wasting money on certain classes that you're throwing money out the window per se to sending them to these different classes that they've got to have, or you've got to get them up to par, but you could be sending them to somewhere where an area that they want to go in.
I think you've lived in the county for 20 years or quite some
49 years.
49 years.
49 years.
And you've been a sheriff's deputy in Hall County.
25.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
What is something that you do that interests you outside of your job, something you enjoy that gives you an insight to being a part of Habersham County and being part of the Habersham County family? Things you do, things you're interested in?
Oh, I tell you.
Some people will get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah. Gardening. I love to garden. And of course, then after garden, fall comes in, so I love to hunt. And I love to deer hunt, I love to bear hunt and turkey hunt, and trout fish and bass. So that's it. It's a year-round thing. If it ain't fishing, it's hunting, then it's in the garden, and I enjoy all of those. I really, really do.
Are you a registered voter?
I am.
Good. Though we acknowledge that law enforcement is a dangerous career and a time-consuming career, and we, I think, honor our law enforcement employees all over the state and in our county here, sometimes decisions get made which might not have been the best decisions. And we've seen something like that happen this past year in Habersham County with the no-knock warrant issue. How do you feel about the no-knock warrant style of law enforcement?
Well, at the forum last night, I had a question similar to that, and I instantly come off with the no. I don't want no-knock search warrants. There is a time that there possibly could be called for one. Been on a couple of them myself, well, more than a couple, but I have been on some, and those you have to handle with a whole lot of care, a whole lot of let's look in and planning, look into the planning stage, let alone, if you get on the scene, you've got to be aware of your surroundings. There's so much to a no-knock warrant. Would I rather, in some cases go that way? No, I'd rather get away from it totally. There's so many other ways that you can work drugs out here on the street to get inside, and a lot of that, you kind of want to leave within law enforcement. I don't want to give all the tricks away to making that happen. But as far as the no-knock warrant, I'm not a fan of it, because as we well know, not only did it happen here in Habersham, it happened in Atlanta to an elderly female, and she wound up, her life got taken. So the no-knock warrant's proven that shouldn't be one of the first choices we look into.
What goals do you have as a leader in the county, the sheriff? What goals might you have? What's one of the first things you might do as sheriff, or something you think is important that you need to focus on?
Well, there again, I'm going to go back to staffing and training. I want to slow down, or if I can stop doing the hiring and people leaving, using maybe as a stepping stone to go somewhere else. I'd like to be able to retain the people and keep them here. That way the county gets to know the officers that's in their district or zone, because the criminals sit here and watch you too. And as somebody that's doing drugs, or as somebody that's doing a burglary, of course we know those go hand in hand. If you're sitting here and you don't retain the people, then you're changing officers on a yearly basis. Those criminals are watching, and they're riding right by the new officer going and doing the same thing. So retaining one of them and training. When I say training, that goes back to the specific for officers. If I want to go to work drugs, why have I'm needed at the courthouse, so I'm working at the courthouse, and I wind up getting left there for a good while, then I'm going to leave. So why not try to get that officer where he wants to go and put him in place and get him educated on where he's at? That's another way of retaining them. So that's two goals of many that I'm sure we don't have time to sit and talk about, but those are two to get me started.
You mentioned earlier 92-year-old Catherine Johnson, who was shot by several policemen, Atlanta policemen, and killed. Although she was just in her bed, asleep as a matter of fact. How can Habersham know that as our chief law enforcement, our sheriff, that you will protect us?
Well, that goes along with community involvement. That goes with the sheriff getting out here, going door to door as I'm doing now, and not just in an election. That involves people getting out here, or not the people, but that involves the sheriff getting out here and listening to them. I've had so much community involvement so far saying, well, this is a problem and this is a problem. They've given me ample problems, and I tote around a notepad and I write down the complaints and the gripes that are going on and the praises that's here. And you have to keep your ear to the ground, and you have to listen to the Habersham County people, because that's who you work for when it comes down to the bottom line. And, you know, once, if elected and getting in there, you've got to start from day one and get back out here and stay out here and listen to the people and see which way they take you, because the citizens, you know, that's what you're here for. You're here to protect them. And I know at one point in time, when I first got in it, it was protect and serve, protect and serve. And I always like to put a word with that, it's prevention. Protect and serve and to prevent. You know, if you got an officer that's out here and he goes into a neighborhood that we're not having no problems, of course, you know, you want to go through all of them. But, you know, do you have the manpower to cover everything? Probably not right now. I mean, it's a smaller county. I'm used to a larger county. I do not want to bring anything north, as far as Hall County. I've had that asked to me. But, you know, if you've got a bad neighborhood or a bad crime, you know, crime's going on in a certain neighborhood or a certain area, then that's where we need to be. So, you know, that's one thing that I would look at also.
Do you participate in any, or have you participated in any volunteer activities throughout your life and that you've lived in Habersham County?
I've done some of that trash pickup, you know, with the municipalities that go on, stuff like that. I really, you know, there's several that I've seen that I would really like to get out here and do. The only thing that it always seems to fall, you know, of course while I'm working in Hall County, it always seemed to fall when I wanted to do something, I was working. And, you know, things just happen to fall that way. Am I interested in doing things like that? Sure, by all means.
The sheriff has to work closely with the district attorney here in Habersham County and everywhere else as well. A lot of people feel we have a drug issue, a drug problem in our county. Could you speak to that? As a crime.
As a crime, you know, I'll be honest with you, you see it everywhere. Have I dealt with it up here? And I'm going to kind of let one lay over the other. As working in Hall County, I've stopped people coming out of Habersham County on a traffic stop, and once you got to the root of the problem, they were going to a pill mill. They were headed further south, you know, and they spoke last night, it's always supply and demand. There again, there's a way to work this stuff. We're not going to get it all. You know, if it's me, Tanya, or Joey, either one, nobody's going to get it, or anybody else that runs, you're not going to get all this. But you do have to focus where these areas are, and if you can't, you know, if we can't put them in jail or try to get them some help, or try, you know, we could at least try to flush them into other areas. I know I've been told, you know, if you can't get them, push them into the next county or push them here. I'd really like to get them, and you look to try to get them help. And there again, all that falls on the person of going, I've hit the bottom, I need help. Unfortunately, there's too many out here that's still chasing the recreation of it. So, you know, as far as the drugs, pill mills, the meth, you know, the old meth lab, I think they're changing and doing different things. I haven't really been that deep into it over the last year or so. So, it's, you know, a lot of it's going to educate yourself with this drugs and using your resources. Your resources are a huge thing to me. You know, at the state level to federal level, and talking with these other drug agents, you know, getting together with them, finding out what the new thing is on the street, what it's going, where it's coming from. So, you know, there's a lot when it comes to drugs to pay attention to. There really is.
We have 7 municipalities in Habersham County, plus the Sheriff's Department and law enforcement in those. How do you see the Sheriff's Department working with the police departments in our local cities?
Had that question asked about a week ago from a citizen. You have to work closely with each one of them. There is no doubt, and especially in Habersham where they're so small. You've got 1 or 2 working at these municipalities at a certain time. And, you know, their backup, if they were, you know, something happened on a traffic stop or something popped up, you know, that they needed help, you've got to work closely as far as law enforcement goes with each officer from the ground up. They have to work very closely together, and with other things that come up at an administrative level. That's the whole thing's communication with each other, understanding, and trying to obtain one goal together.
Chad Mueller, good luck to you in
thank
the
you.
sheriff's race, and hope to talk to you soon. Hi, I'm Dick Stafford for Now Habersham, and today we're speaking with Joey Terrell, the incumbent for the sheriff's position at Habersham County. And welcome to Now Habersham, Joey.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, we have some questions for you. First of all, what is your formal education that prepared you in your role as sheriff for Habersham County?
Formal education, I'm just a graduate of Habersham Central High School. I do have a degree from North Georgia Technical College in auto collision, so I had some extra English and math and some subjects there. But all my education for sheriff has basically come through the job. I started with the sheriff's office in 1995 and worked my way up through, and I've been through supervision classes, management classes, and different things of those nature.
What about informal opportunities, experience education, things that you've been involved with in your life that maybe influence how you perform your job as sheriff and how you would perform it if reelected?
Church is a big thing to me. My faith in Jesus Christ. So I'm trying to stay active in my church. I'm a member of the Trace Diaz community. So I rely heavily on my faith, and I do a lot of praying, seeking God's guidance, and seeking grace in everything we do. We try and stay involved in the community and different organizations, going and speaking with them, speaking to church groups. I'm not necessarily a member of every group that's out there. I've never felt led to join them. I don't want to be a member of them just to be a member of them, to have your name on a roster. So I've just never felt that lead. But I say the biggest thing that helps guide me is my faith.
Mm-hmm. You've been in the position and running for re-election, but what might be some new goals or some new things to focus on that maybe we haven't looked at in the past in your role as sheriff? What are some new challenges you think maybe ought to be studied or worked on?
If we're not growing, then we're dying. We have to grow, we have to expand. We always have to challenge ourselves in everything we do. Our society is changing. Our world is changing, and we must keep up with that. One thing that we're trying to get going is an Explorer program, 14 to 20-year-olds. And there's not really a set, and we'll use my air quotes, I like them, curriculum for that. But, it gets kids involved, especially if they're interested in law enforcement career, because there's a lot of them out there. A lot of kids grow up and want to be a law enforcement officer, police officer. So we try and get them engaged in what we do, as far as some of the different aspects of report writing, stopping cars. We're going to teach handgun safety. There's a lot of kids out there that they don't get that from anyone anymore, handgun safety. So that's a big thing. So that's what we're trying to look at and get into our schools to help with that, and instill the some and I don't want to use the word integrity, but sometimes that's what you got to get to in there. A sense of worth to those kids, and why don't you want to do drugs because everybody else is doing it? Why do you want to go drink because everybody else is doing it? Those kind of things we want to help instill in those kids, and that's one of the biggest programs that we're working on. We're still doing our Citizens Law Enforcement Academy, and that's one way to try and get the community, the citizens involved in what does law enforcement do and why do they do it? Why do they make cases the way they do? Why do they do traffic stops the way they do? What does the court say about it? And in a lot of what we do, we have legislatures that make the law, but then you have the courts who come in, and there's case law that usually supersedes what the legislature wants or even what the people want, and that's not always a good thing. I'm not always for that, especially when you're looking at the U.S. Supreme Court and some of their decisions. Sometimes they think they know better than what the people want, and that's not a republic. That's not how it was set up. But those are the things that we have to deal with, and so we're trying to get the community involved in that to see what law enforcement does. We're doing handgun safety classes for the general public, because we have a lot of folks out there. You know, it's a big thing. You hear it on the national news a lot. You know, Second Amendment rights. You know, I'm a constitutional officer. Your sheriff is a constitutional officer. You know, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Georgia. I swore by that. My deputies do the same thing. You know, we don't work for the federal government. If there's a mandate that comes down tomorrow from the president to take everybody's guns, we're not doing that because we don't work for them. So, you know, there's many aspects that we try and stay involved with that on the handgun safety and everything, because everybody wants a handgun. Everybody's getting a handgun carrying permit, and a lot of folks have never had a handgun. So we try and bring that safety aspect into it, so there's not an accident or somebody don't get their hands on a gun that doesn't need to in the household.
Most professions have an ongoing annual amount of time they have to do additional training or certification. Most all professions do. And I believe sheriff's deputies and law enforcement do as well, 20 hours a year or something like that. Is there a need to do more than that? And would you do more? And if you did, what areas might our sheriff's deputies need more training?
You know, 20 hours a year sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot. You can do most of those sitting behind a computer and never really get into the meat of having any extra training. You know, the things you're required by law to do is recertification on your handgun, firearms recertification, and a use of force, which use of force can be for anyone. That's part of what we teach in our courses. But that's the only two things you're required. Everything else is you can get offline. And I hate to say it, but lots of times that's the way a lot of officers get by getting their hours, so they're done for the year and don't have to worry about losing their certification. But we looked at a couple of years ago, you know, training is a big thing. So we moved stuff around. We took a secretary's position out of the investigations, and we created a training officer's position, full-time training officer. You know, I've been trying to, you know, you tell people that we have a training division, but lots of times that don't sink in. But we have a guy, and that's his job. He's a full-time.
I've never heard of that. So,
yes, sir. And
wow.
we've tried to talk about. You try and tell folks, you know, we have a full-time training division. When you say division, it's a guy. It's one guy. He's a division of himself. But we have one man who's a training officer. He's an instructor of his own, which he's been through IT school, which is a 2-week, in-depth, hard course to be an instructor, to teach police academy courses for law enforcement. Also in the department, we have a gentleman who's a shotgun instructor, rifle instructor. So they're certified to teach other people in a rifle course. So those are the things that we've added, that layer of training. Instead of having to go to Forsyth to rely on your training or go to other agencies to rely on your training, we have a trailer at the office where it's kind of you have to look at the whole thing, what we've done. The county's paying a lot of rent. So they're trying to cut down the rent. So our part of trying to cut down the rent is we moved our investigators back to the sheriff's office. We had a gentleman down here in Cornelia give us a big double-wide trailer for free. We moved it in, put investigators on one side, we put a training room in the other. We can seat about 25 people. It's not huge, but about 25, that's good for us. So we offer everything from domestic violence training. We just went through the Narcan training, where all of our officers carry the antidote for, if somebody has a heroin overdose. We went through all that, and that was taught by one of our instructors. One of our guys there is not only, he's our patrol commander, but he's also a paramedic. So he can teach that course to our people.
I have a friend in another state who's running for office, and we were chatting the other day on the phone, and I said, "Are you a registered voter?" He said, So let me ask you, are you a registered voter?
I registered to vote when I was 18 years old. Selective service, registered to vote. That is one of the most important rights that we have as an American, is to be able to go vote. Look around the country, not around the country, but look around the world. A lot of places they can't do that. There's armed guards guarding everything where you try and go and vote. So I stress that. I talk with it about my children. What does it mean to vote? What does that mean? Does one vote mean anything? To me, it does. One vote means something.
Joey, there have been some, I teach journalism at Georgia State in Atlanta, and there have been some media about some county commissioners, not in our county, but elsewhere, and also state senators and state representatives who own businesses on the side that do business with the state, which seems to me to be, in my own mind, illegal and immoral. But it's not always, depending on what it is. So let me just ask you the question as I'm asking others. Do you own any businesses that you might be profited by being sheriff?
I don't have time for any other businesses. I did. I had I tell you what I did do before I was elected. I had a dump truck. And a good friend told me one day, he says, you know, the best 2 days of owning a dump truck? It's the day you buy it and the day you sell it. And then I had a grass cutting business on the side. And I basically give all that to my partner. So I don't have any businesses on the side. My business is being the sheriff.
At the recent political forum sponsored by Habersham County Chamber of Commerce and the Farm Bureau, the Habersham Farm Bureau,
Yes, sir.
You and the other 2 candidates were asked this question. So I'll rephrase it just a little bit. But quite honestly, at that event, I was sort of awestruck with your response, which was pretty, to me, pretty emotional, upfront, and very frank. You were asked, all of you were asked about no-knock search warrants, and as your response, you gave that you mentioned we're going to do it a different way now, and you even said that several times in a row. And also noticed when the other candidates gave their responses and it was your turn, you leaned toward the microphone, you lowered your voice, and you looked out at the audience, and I thought, wow, this is a come to Jesus moment here. And you gave a response that was really heartfelt. So could you talk, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about that just a little bit.
Yeah, it was, I appreciate that forum and that opportunity to get before the folks, but you didn't have much time either in the whole thing. We talk about no-knock search warrants, we're talking, we're going back, we're talking about Baby Boo Boo. I mean, that's where we're headed with that,
Or others, like in Atlanta, we had a 92-year-old just down the street from me, African-American lady who was shot to death with a no-knock warrant. She was in her bed asleep. Mm-hmm. So anyway, go ahead.
And there's, and I know there's many examples all over the country, because in anything you do, when you have people involved in stuff, things can get screwed up. Bottom line, we're human. We all make mistakes. But what do we do with those mistakes? How do we try and prevent those mistakes? You rely on your people. It goes back to training. You try and train your people. You give them all the information about how to write warrants, how to, write up affidavits for the search warrant, how to do their paperwork. Then you rely on them. You trust them. You have to put trust in them. It's about trust, and you have to have trust, because one, you can't be there with them all the time. You can't be sitting there holding their hand to make sure they do it correctly. Then to take that affidavit before a judge and swear to it to get a warrant to get you in someplace. When you ask for a no-knock provision in a warrant, there has to be exigent circumstances to get that warrant. We're talking about weapons. And when you're talking about no-knock warrants, you're usually always talking about drugs. That's what you're talking about. And when you have drugs involved, you usually always have weapons involved. So you're looking at what's the safety of trying to go in, and because as law enforcement, you're called to go in. We're called to go after these people who are breaking the law and using it to their advantage against other people. You weigh out what's the safety aspect to that. A no-knock provision just basically means you go up the door, you use a battering ram, you knock it in, you go in, sheriff's office, take everybody into custody. Without a no-knock search warrant, you knock on the door, you announce yourself. But the courts have never said, how many times do you announce yourself? You have to do it 5 times, 6 times, 1 time? That's the difference. When we get down to the brass tacks, the whole thing, what is the difference between a no-knock search warrant and a regular search warrant? What's the difference? One is you knock on the door. Sheriff's office search warrant. You say it 1 time. They don't open the door, then guess what? You do the same thing you do in the other one. That's the difference in it. And I know a lot of people, and that's part of, I go back to our Citizens Police Academy. We get in depth on this, talking about search warrants and what's the difference in them? What does the court say? What does the U.S. Supreme Court say in it? How do we have to act and how do we have to handle ourselves? And that's the big difference in all of it. You don't take lightly the fact that you're asking for a no-knock search warrant. And a lot of times you don't take the fact lightly that you're even asking for a search warrant anyways. Because when you're getting a search warrant, you're going against people's constitutional rights to the privacy in their own homes, their papers and their effects. That's what you're going against. So you have to bring probable cause to a judge, and they have to agree with you that you have that. So as police, you have to collect information, take your case to the judge, and apply for the search warrant and get your search warrant through a judge. So that's, and I don't want to use the word nutshell, but that's just a small glimpse of kind of how you do that. And how do you get to search warrant status? What does that mean? How do you get there? That has been reviewed. We've changed how we do our drug stuff. We're a member of the Appalachian Drug Task Force now, which is a GBI-run task force. They don't really execute no-knock search warrants anymore. That doesn't mean that they won't. That's not, there's nothing that says they will not do one.
I really saw last night, because we don't know each other really.
Yes, sir.
I really saw a human sitting there in front of a large group of audience. Maybe I read it into it. That I thought you were moved when you were talking about the injury of the child, and I thought, well, he's really upset about that.
Yes, sir.
And that's what I saw. And
it is. It's a personal.
Did I
that's
read
a
that?
personal thing to me that a child got hurt on my watch. That's the last thing in the world that anybody wants is a child to be hurt. And I pray for that family every day. I pray for the skin of Jesus on that child. I can't help but tear up when I talk about it because it's personal. It's personal. I think about them all the time. And, when the no-knock search warrant comes up, that's where my mind automatically goes because that's what we're talking about. And it is, and it's very personal to me, and it's very personal to the men who were involved in it and the women that were involved in it, because they changed a life. And that's not what you sign up for. When you sign up to law enforcement, you're signing up to serve and protect. You're not signing up to injure somebody and and create medical bills and stuff. That's not what you're after. And it grieves your soul tremendously. And those things, that burden, I'll carry that burden for me for the rest of my life. If the citizens, see fit not to reelect me this time, God has a plan. It doesn't matter. But you always ask for grace in every situation. You're always trying to strive to be better. But I will always carry that. When I'm 90 years old, I hope to live to be 90 or greater. That will be on my mind. I will never forget that night when I received that phone call. And, I always pray for them. It's on my prayer list. I got their names written down, and I pray for them. So we strive to change how we do things to make sure, that something like that never happens again. Now, can you sit here, and that's the thing, can we sit here and say that, that an innocent person will never be hurt again in a search warrant? We could be assisting the U.S. Marshals and doing a search warrant on child porn, and somebody can get hurt. They could. I've seen one that almost went bad not long ago because they didn't want to be caught in what they did. They wanted to continue to hide, and U.S. Marshals almost shot one of them.
Joey Terrell, thank you for visiting with us and your candidacy for Habersham County Sheriff.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We hope you've benefited from these interviews sponsored by Now Habersham. And we want to remind you, be sure to vote May 24th.